Hello, James McKee coming at you. And today I'm going to talk about one way I think you could make Lovecraft scarier than it already is, specifically with Call of Cthulhu, which I have to admit is one of my favorite games and definitely a game I don't think I get to play enough. I mean, I absolutely love Call of Cthulhu. And I think seventh edition is one of the tightest rule sets of any rule set. I mean, it is so much better than the majority of more modern games out there. I'm, you know, I mean, just to blow a little whatever and piss some people off, I would even go so far as to say that Call of Cthulhu Seventh Edition, though it does different things, is still a far superior game than like 5e. It really is. Of course, if you're used to playing a game where your character is a superhero and can do all kinds of crazy stuff, you're probably not going to like Call of Cthulhu, where you play an average human who might be a mechanic or a college student or whatever in 1920s and 30s, up to you, or modern, wherever. Here is my thoughts, and this is a thought that goes along with my how to make the forest a dungeon, etc. Is the one thing that I feel like Lovecraft really missed out on. Not that it was his problem. It wasn't his problem. It wasn't his fault. But he liked to set his degenerative, cultic families out in the countrysides of the Catskills or wherever, right? Now, while that worked for him, I think what you could do, though, is set a Call of Cthulhu game. Who knows how many sessions it would go, because you never know. Everybody could just get killed, right? But take all of that wonderful, everything that's great about H.P. Lovecraft and, cosmic horror and cultic stuff like that, except instead of doing what, a lot of people do and setting it in New England. No, no, no. Set it somewhere far creepier than any place in New England. And those of you who know me, you already know what I'm going to say. Set it in Appalachia, whether it's West Carolina or West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, Northern Georgia, North Carolina, wherever you set it. Now, me, Eastern Kentucky, obviously. I grew up there. Part of my life. So that's definitely, where I was born. It's where I feel home. It's, as we say in Russian, it is where my Rodinya is. So think about it like this. I'm going to give you an example of what I'm thinking about, right? If the characters leave Miskatonic and they take a train up to Vermont, and in Vermont, they run into some like really inbred cultists who are worshiping some great old one, right? That's kind of scary. That's kind of scary. Everybody will admit that's kind of scary, right? But change that. What if the characters leave Miskatonic University for a train ride to Cincinnati, where they then might have to take a train, who knows where? I'd have to look at the maps from back then, only to find themselves in Harland County, Kentucky in the 1920s. There's already a bunch of issues because the coal miners are super mad at the people who own the mines. There's, threats of unionization. There's families back in those hollers that have been there for 200+ years and maybe never leave those hollers. You get what I'm saying here, right? So setting a Call of Cthulhu adventure into that area, and whatever the hook could be someone's digging around and they find some ancient artifact. So now your investigators from Miskatonic got to go down to Eastern Kentucky to check out this thing, right? But what if a good portion of the people in this county are either actively a part of the cult, or they know about it and they just keep their mouth shut because it's the best thing for them to do if they want to continue, growing their corn and not ending up being fed to a monster, right? So we've got a county where a lot of the people, maybe even the sheriffs and stuff, are into the whole cult thing. There's degenerate inbred families deep in the forest, in the hollers, down dirt roads that are one lane, and where if you mess up, you could roll your Model T down 100 feet to the bottom of a cliff, and that could be just the end of that, right? And you need to figure out what is going on. That's a premise I think more people should check out. Now, I have Bloody Appalachia. It's a great game, but I would rather do a Call of Cthulhu game. And yet I would still like to use Appalachia because, having been there, I have seen some of the creepiest shit ever, like in real life. Like my sanity score would probably be, barely double digits at this point. And I mean low double digits, right? On top of that, I've heard all the stories of the Appalachian witches and, weird moon-eyed people and stuff that the Cherokee were terrified of, and dogmen and this and that and the other. I mean, on and so forth. Haunted areas and all this. So, add all of that, which is my actual life, and then decide to make a game about it set in the mid-20s in Harland County, Kentucky, somewhere. And so what would be the next important thing for you to do? Well, the first or next important thing would be to figure out, okay, you got your cult. What are the goals of the cult? Well, maybe the cult's goals are just to keep doing what they're doing. They've been doing it for a couple hundred years. The cult was brought over from the old country, and they've just been doing their thing. They kind of hate outsiders, except, maybe as victuals, or, to sacrifice to their dark deity. And that's just kind of what's going on there, right? So what great old one do you think a cult of inbred, cannibalistic, possibly cultists, people in Eastern Kentucky, what makes the most sense for them to be worshipers of? And immediately, my mind says Shub-Niggurath, the goat with 1,000 youngs, the black goat of the wood with 1,000 young, right? I even have a child of the aforementioned Shub-Niggurath right here, right? This is a child of. So why? Well, if it comes from the old country, Scots Irish, stuff like that, fertility goddess. See, at the heart of everything, Shub-Niggurath is a fertility goddess, but an incredibly dark, twisted, constantly giving birth and then devouring. Occasionally, some of the children get away, but whatever, right? And so you hear stories, like I was listening to a guy talking about the lore, where cultists actually have these yearly equinox rituals where all sorts of incestuous behavior goes on. And then the next year, any children conceived during these horrible couplings gets sacrificed to Shub-Niggurath, and they actually then boil and eat those children. Of course, they'll boil and eat anyone if there's no children for them. They'll try and kidnap someone else's, or maybe they'll just find a drunk on the side of the road. Whatever, someone's getting sacrificed and ate, and this is something they do at certain times, the equinoxes, solstice, certain times of the year. And now your adventurers who have came from the civilized north are out in the middle of the woods, and they may have found this thing out. And what might make things even more terrifying is when your civilized college professors find out that the people they could normally run to for help, the sheriff, whatever, are in on it. Maybe even the local Baptist ministers in on it, and he's, the church of, the ever young or whatever. And they kind of pull themselves off as your typical Protestant church. But in reality, behind the scenes, they're 100% down with Lady Shub, as they could call her by different names. You could come up with all kinds of stuff, right? And I've been doing this. And who knows, maybe I need to start writing some of this stuff down. But basically, take your favorite Lovecraft stories and then drop them into the middle of Appalachia. And I think that story automatically becomes twice as terrifying, because you're in now, unless you grew up there, you're in an alien environment. You don't know anything. You don't know anyone. And everyone knows the stories, the witchcraft and, stuff like that. So all of a sudden, that could be a thing. So that's just kind of what's on my mind now. Like, I don't have any advice for how to run that. But this is a story idea. A part of the county that most people never go, reachable only on like narrow dirt roads, where the vast majority of people there are in on it, and they're worshiping a goddess brought from the old world hundreds of years ago, and these things are going on. And your characters somehow either need to escape this area or put an end to it. Depends on what kind of characters are in the group. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about while I've been finishing up, painting up my Asha Greyjoy and the unit of Black Tide Chosen that she's going to be a member of. I just got finished the base. And I thought I would share that with you guys because that's creepy. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about it and I'm like, yeah, that'd be creepy. Like you'd have to stop at some tiny little town and hope that there's a common house there. You could rent rooms. Does the person who owned the hotel, are they part of it? Or could they be a good source of information or at least a warning to you? Like, you stay at this old hotel in this tiny little town that used to be a coal town, but now, the coal mine long since is gone. And most people around here don't work at all, And if they do, it's cutting lumber or something to sell, right? And then all of a sudden, they're like, oh, I wouldn't go down in those hollers, And when you're like, well, why not? And they could be like, well, especially of a night, it said that there's things down there no man should ever see. And of course, if you can do a good hillbilly accent, I've kind of lost mine, even better, right? And all of a sudden, yeah, you're wandering down into these hollers. And of course, the holler's going to be so far away that even if you leave mid-morning, by the time you get to the area, because you're going to have to walk most of it, it's going to be close to dark. So that makes it even worse, right? And then the players might be, they may encounter, a dark spawn, or just a bunch of cultists with double barrel shotguns and whatever out there. And that's not counting the fact that they could accidentally run up on moonshiners who have nothing to do with anything. They're just moonshiners. They don't know anything about the cult or anything. They're out there moonshining, and they don't appreciate a bunch of Yankees running up on their still. However, played right, they could become very cool allies / points of information. Of course, this could be needs to be broadened out before it could be an actual adventure. Maps would have to be made, consulted online, etc. But yes, this is the Call of Cthulhu game I would be interested in running for my players at some point. So if you think this is a good idea, if you're a fan of weird and wacky stories from Appalachia and also the mythos of Lovecraft, give it a consideration of putting the two together. I mean, it might be like the whole Reese's cup, right? You got your chocolate and my peanut butter, and now it's better than either alone. Yeah, And like I said, they worship a strange goddess from the old country. Yeah. Inbreeding and degeneration and madness and cannibalism and right? So if you liked it, again, share, chat, tell me how about it, whatever. And, as usual, have a wonderful day and avoid, the great old ones and whatnot. They're not good for you. Bye-bye.